Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today we're in the fourth and final episode. We are finishing out our series of every Pokemon trading card game Masters Division World's winning deck ever. So let's start off in 2017 with Infinite Force. This was a wonderful World Championships. Firstly, it was won by Diego Casaraga, a very old school player who'd been around for a long time and finally got their big moment. That was awesome. Secondly, it was won by Gardevoir, which became legal on the day of the World Championships. The first tournament with the new set Burning Shadows, and Gardevoir went and won. And let's make no mistake about it, this was a Gardevoir deck. You had an ability to let you attach an extra energy per turn. We had Infinite Force to let you deal 30 damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. And then we had a GX attack. GXs, of course, were around by this point, and you had a GX once per game attack. And it let you shuffle 10 cards from your discard pile into your deck. What else did we have here? Well, we had Gallade. Gallade was another Pokemon which, of course, is on the same evolution line as Gardevoir, and it let you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. Worth noting, of course, we would also play Octillery that let you draw until you had 5 cards in your hand. The combination of those 2 cards was brilliant. But Gallade also had an attack that did 130 damage if you played a supporter card this turn for only 2 colourless energy, and of course was a fighting type so that you cover another weakness, which was pretty awesome. But make no mistake about it, this was a Gardevoir deck. We did see Diancie seeing a little bit of play, because for a single energy you can search your deck that evolves from one of your Pokemon and put it on them, i.e. you start the game with Diancie and start evolving into Gardevoir. And we also saw Alolan Vulpix was a phenomenal card that for 0 energy let you search out any 2 Pokemon. That helped massively. We got Gardevoir, we smashed, job's a good 'un. Elsewhere in the deck, we had Bridget at this point, let you search your deck for a basic EX or 3 basic non-EX. That helped you set up quite nicely. And we had Ace Roller to let you pick up one of your damaged Pokemon. But honestly here, it was just lots of consistency. Your supporter cards were Professor Sycamore and N. We played 4 Versus Seeker, obviously to reuse supporter cards, like everybody did. It's why your one of supporters actually worked an awful lot better. And then it was things like Choice Band that did a little bit of extra damage, 30 more to EXs and GXs for instance. But largely, it was get Gardevoir, get rolling, smash. 1 year later, in 2018, we saw a victory for Robin Schultz with Zoroark-Garbodor. Now, Zoroark is one of the best cards we've ever seen in the history of the game. This was its time to be immortalized as a World Championship winning deck. Zoroark had the ability Trade that let you discard a card from your hand and draw 2 cards, and you'd obviously have multiple of these, so you'd be drawing a huge amount of cards. And then for 2 energy, you did 20 damage for each of your Pokemon in play. Technically, it had another attack, but the world's winning deck didn't even play the right amount of energy to use it. You weren't using a GX attack, you were using Riotous Beating, you were drawing more cards than your opponent, and you were going from there. The main partner here was Garbodor, but there were 2 different Garbodor. So we had the one from Breakpoint that if there's a tool attached, you turn off abilities, which is awesome, but it was all Pokemon in play have no abilities. That would include your own. Not ideal, but absolutely necessary against some decks. And then we had the Garbodor that came around in Guardians Rising that for a single energy did 20 damage for each item card in your opponent's discard pile. Against some decks, that would do redonkulous energy. And the energy you were playing here was double colourless for Zoroark, and then unit energy, which was lightning, psychic, and metal, so that you could play and actually use Garbodor's attack. Because the other one you would use here was Kartana-GX. Largely here, it's the ability, when you play it, you discard a special energy from your opponent's Pokemon. Awesome. And the GX attack, Blade-GX, lets you take a prize. Like I said, you're not using Zoroark's GX attack, you are using Kartana's single energy, take a prize, yes. You could use Gale Blade to do 70 and shuffle it into your deck, but mostly here, it's a GX attack to take a prize. And then Tapu Lele. It's actually not terrible, because you can heal up your bench with Tapu Cure, though you'd rarely do so. And you can use Energy Drive to do 20 for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. But also when you play it from your hand to your bench, you get to search for a supporter card. That is frankly a pretty big deal. And that's what we did. Now, once again, consistency here was absolutely key. Mysterious Treasure was a fun card. Let you discard a card from your hand and search for a Psychic Pokemon, which was very good because a lot of your deck was Psychic. And Bridget featured very heavily here, as did Evo Soda. Evo Soda let you search your deck for a card that evolves one of your Pokemon and evolve them. Now, you couldn't cheat evolution, you had to wait till they'd been down a turn, but given that your entire deck is stage 1s, Evo Soda became a very, very big deal. You play free Field Blower, ironically, well, for a bunch of reasons, but largely to turn off your opponent's Garbodor by getting rid of their tool. And Robin Schultz was a big proponent of Town Map, even called the deck Victory Map. Let you play with your prize cards face up, meant you always had access to whatever was prized if you could take prizes, which is a very, very big deal. As was playing for Puzzle of Time. Puzzle of Time was one of those cards, if you just played one, you rearrange the top 3 cards of your deck. Not terrible when you're drawing as many cards as you do with Zoroark, but if you play 2 at the same time, you put any 2 cards from your discard pile into your hand. Any cards you like come back. That's a very, very big deal. And again, because you're drawing so many cards with Zoroark, this would actually work a lot of the time, which was absolutely absurd. Now, moving forward one more year, we get to Perfection in 2019, the last time we had a World Championship before a rather large break. And this was where Henry Brand won the World Championships with Mewtwo and Mew-GX. That's right, we had reached the age of tag team Pokemon. And Mewtwo and Mew was a I can do anything I like deck. Because you had the ability Perfection, hence the name, it allowed the Pokemon to use the attacks of any Pokemon EX or GX either on your bench or in the discard pile. Now, we did have Miraculous Duo GX, free energy 200, but if there was an extra, you held all damage from all of your Pokemon, which could be genuinely relevant, it would see play sometimes. But mostly here, we're playing a fire build with Welder. Welder was a phenomenal supporter card, let you attach 2 fire energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon and draw 3 cards. And that was the engine of this deck. Use Welder, get a bunch of energy onto Mewtwo and Mew, and then be able to basically just copy a bunch of attacks. We had Giant Half at the time, which was a stadium card that let you discard a card from your hand and search for 2 fire energy to make sure that Welder was actually going to work. We had Fire Crystal that let you put 3 fire energy from your discard pile into your hand to make sure Welder was actually going to work. And we even played stuff like Acrobike. Look at the top 2 cards of your deck. One goes in your hand, one goes in the discard pile, which would both allow you to draw more cards on an item card, yay, but also potentially get Pokemon EX and GX, although let's face it, they were all GXs here, into the discard pile so that you could copy them with Mewtwo and Mew. It was a pretty big deal. And along the same lines, we even played Bill's Analysis. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck, reveal up to 2 trainer cards and put them in your hand, shuffle the other cards back into your deck, just to try and make sure you can get this rolling nice and quickly. And we even played 4 Pokegear 3.0 because we needed to get Welder as often as we could. Being able to look at the top 7 cards of your deck to find a supporter card like Welder, pretty big deal. So which Pokemon were we actually using here? Oh, I should actually mention Cherish Ball. Let you search for a Pokemon GX, get it in your hand so you can either play it or discard it. So which Pokemon are we using? Well, we've got a bunch. We've got Reshiram and Charizard. This had a bunch of good attacks. 2 energy, 30 damage plus 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. 4 energy, flat 230. Or double blades that did 200 for free energy. Or 300 and goes through anything for 6 energy. And because it's fire energy and you've got Welder, that is not outside the realms of possibility. We've got Solgaleo-GX that for 2 energy did 120 and attached 2 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your bench. Great if you can take a KO with it so you can keep accelerating energy. Also a GX attack that healed all of your Pokemon, but mostly it was for Turbo Strike. We had Naganadel, which for 4 energy let you discard 2 and do 170 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Yeah, that was fun. You did play it was mostly a fire deck, but there was some Psychic Blade, so you could use Venom Shot to absolutely wreck the bench. One of the main targets here, of course, would be Dedenne-GX, and we played 3 of them in the deck because Dede Change, discard your hand, draw 6 cards, was an amazing ability. But then we also played Naganadel so we could go after our opponent's Dedenne, which was pretty important. We didn't play Psychic Energy to attack with it, we were just using it for the ability. Magcargo-GX was a very fun one here, because for free energy you did 50 damage, discarding any amount of basic energy from this Pokemon, and dealing 50 more for each energy discarded in this way. You had to discard a bunch of energy, but this could get big. We then had Single Energy GX attack that discarded the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck. Another GX attack that absolutely could be used here. We had Latios GX, which had a rather nice ability that prevented all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's tag team Pokemon. And don't worry about the ability that says it can't attack if there's 4 or fewer Pokemon in play, because you're copying it with Mewtwo and Mew, it doesn't matter. But there were a lot of tag team decks around at the time, being able to block them with this was fun. Oh, and a really fun GX attack that just stopped your opponent using GX attacks, so you use this, your opponent can't use their GX attack. In some matchups, that came in very, very handy indeed. We had Zoroark-GX, which was honestly here for the ability. Don't apply Psychic weakness when Pokemon take damage from attacks. Well, you're weak to Psychic. Oh wait, Jirachi's in play. No, you're not. You're no longer weak to Psychic. We did have a GX attack for free energy, did 100, and prevented all effective attacks, including damage during your opponent's next turn. You did play enough Psychic energy to use it, but mostly this was here to give you no weakness with the ability. And then we had Espeon and Deoxys. Free energy, 10 plus 30 more for each of your bent Psychic Pokemon could be good, but Cross Division GX could be brutal. Place 10 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like, but if there's 6 energy on, you get to drop 20 damage counters. Against some evolution decks, this could be absolutely backbreaking, and again, because it's only one Psychic and the rest can be Fire, and you're playing Welder, you absolutely can use this. And then finally we had Cobalion. I told you had a lot of options for attackers here. And what we had here was an attack for a single energy, a GX attack, that said during your opponent's next turn, their Pokemon can't attack. Turned them off for a turn. We're not playing any metal energy here, so the ability and the other attack are irrelevant. But oh my word, this GX attack in certain situations, making your opponent take a turn off, could be fun. And just quickly worth noting, there were 4 copies in here of Custom Catcher, which was another card you had to play 2 of at the same time. If you only played 1, you drew until you had 3 cards in hand. Not terrible, not great. But if you played 2, you could switch their bench Pokemon while they're active. It was Gusting. That was a very nice Gusting effect. And then we had to wait 3 years for the next World Championships. We didn't have one in 2020. We didn't have one in 2021. But in 2022, we finally got our first promised non-North American World Championships. It moved to London, and I got to cast this one. I casted this World Championships final. I had to wait 3 years to finally get my World Championships in London, but this was my World Championships debut, and I loved it. And what we saw here was a victory from Andre Schgabal, who played a deck that basically had a bunch of different attacking options. Now, the deck was built around Arceus VSTAR. The ability Starbirth, now at this point we're on to V-Stars, and the V-Star power like a GX attack once per game. During your turn, search for any 2 cards. Yeah, so what you do is you evolve up into Arceus, your V-Star, search for any 2 cards, one of which is probably going to end up being double turbo energy, so you can Trinity Nova, do 200 damage, or 180 because double turbo said you did 20 less damage, and then attach free energy to your bench Pokemon V. Step 1, get Arceus, use Starbirth, start accelerating energy. Step 2, find the Pokemon you need to attack with in this matchup. And there were 2 main ones that Andre went for here. Firstly, Flying Pikachu VMAX. Free energy, 160 damage, and then it becomes immune to damage from basic Pokemon. Beefy Pokemon, doesn't take damage from basics. This is fun. Although we need to mention that the non-VMAX, the regular V, did have Fly that did 120 and on a coin flip could get immunity next turn. And of course, we need at this point to point out, V-Stars were 2 prize Pokemon that had a V-Star power. V-Maxes were free prize Pokemon, so you had to be careful using them. But you know what? Some of them were pretty good. The other main attacker here was Hisuian Decidueye V-Star. Free energy, 160. You may discard up to 3 energy cards from hand, doing 30 more for each card you discarded in this way. And a V-Star power to let you draw until you had 8 cards in hand, but most of the time you're using Starbirth. Starbirth is the point here. This had a really good fighting weakness. That was the main point of this. 3 good attackers, hitting a couple of different weaknesses was awesome. Outside of that, you had Bibarel, which just let you draw until you had 5 cards in hand. During Andre's World Championship interview, he said if you want to win Worlds, play Bibarel. We then had Luminion, which let you bench it and search for a supporter card. Not the first time we've seen a Pokemon do that in this series of videos. In fact, the 3rd different Pokemon we've seen that has this ability, featuring in a Worlds winning deck. Not a coincidence. Crobat was similar, but instead of grabbing a supporter card, you drew until you had 6 cards in your hand, more consistency, and Pumpkaboo here let you just bump a stadium. It was fun. Bumping stadiums is good. There was also a stadium that turned off abilities that you'd largely want to get rid of. Elsewhere, by this point we had Boss's Orders, which was just your gusting of choice. Grab a Pokemon from the bench to the active, grab them. We had Path to the Peak, which was the aforementioned stadium that turned off abilities for any Pokemon with a rule box. But the point here is you had to Starbirth, so even though you're playing Path to the Peak, you still had to get rid of an opposing Path to the Peak so that you could Starbirth if it came down too early. And at this point we had staples like Marnie that would just make both players shuffle their hand, put them on the bottom of the deck, and then you would draw 5 and your opponent would draw 4. Good for drawing a bit of disruption as well. We played 1 copy of Raihan here, that if you had a Pokemon KO'd last turn, let you attach a basic energy to one of your Pokemon from the discard, and then search for any card. Very good for these attackers. You know, look at someone like Flying Pikachu VMAX. Well, if the card you search for is double turbo, you can attack this turn. Look at Hisuian Decidueye V-Star. If the card you search for is double turbo, you can attack this. You see where I'm going with this, right? It let you attack with all of your Pokemon. It was awesome. And Quick Ball was great at the time for searching out your basics. Need to give some love to the best Pokeball. And that brings us right up to date in 2023 with Mew's Revenge. Vance Kelly winning the World Championships in Yokohama, Japan. Yeah, the first year after we left North America to go to London, we went to Yokohama. Didn't cast the Masters final this year, but I was on the casting team and it was a wonderful tournament. I loved it. Now, the deal with this deck is it's Mew VMAX and it's Genesect. Genesect draws until you got the same number of cards in your hand as Fusion Strike Pokemon on the board. on your side of the board. So often draw 2, you got 6 cards in hand. The best draw we've ever had in any deck. It's ridiculous. And then Mew VMAX for 2 energy copied any of your bench Fusion Strike Pokemon's attacks, which a lot of the time would actually be Genesect because 210, and you can attack next turn, but Mew's got free retreat. Retreat, you'll be fine. But this deck actually played Fusion Strike energy, partly so that you could do the maximum damage with Mew and you didn't have it reduced by double turbo, and partly so you could attack with Meloetta, that for 2 energy did 70 damage for each Fusion Strike energy attached to all of your Pokemon. So 280 if you've got them all in play. That's kind of ridiculous. And then the only other Pokemon here is Oricorio, which reduces damage done to your Fusion Strike Pokemon by 20. Although I should mention Mew did have an attack which was very much worth copying, just the Mew V I mean, because 2 energy, although really you're just copying it with a VMAX, yeah? 70 damage, shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck. If you can get a KO with this while healing your free prize Mew VMAX, that's a very, very big deal. But there are a lot of trainer cards we need to mention here. Battle VIP Pass could only be used on your first turn of the game, but it went and grabbed 2 basic Pokemon. And that's where Genesect then lets you draw like your entire deck and win. Cram-O-Matic, you had to discard an item card from your hand, but then you flipped a coin and if heads, you got to search for any card. Like an energy, or indeed, on turn 1, you're going for Battle VIP Pass. Power Tablet let your Fusion Strike Pokemon do an extra 30 damage this turn, and you would also play this alongside Choice Belt to do 30 more to EXs and Vs, and you would basically be able to do a lot more damage than it looked like. You could reach to some big impressive KOs. Your VSTAR power here actually came from Forest Seal Stone, which was so important Vance actually played 3 of them, bearing in mind it's 1 VSTAR power per turn, but it let you search your deck for any card. But this wasn't on a V-Star, it was a tool. You could attach it to any Pokemon V, like Mew or Genesect, and then search for any card, like Battle VIP Pass or whatever, and this was phenomenal, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely phenomenal. Lost Vacuum was an important card for getting rid of stadiums and tools, especially Path to the Peak because of the whole Genesect thing, although you would still play Path to the Peak, just in case. But you also played Lost City, so that when Pokemon got KO'd, they went to the Lost Zone and couldn't be recovered. Very important to get rid of some of your opponent's best Pokemon. And a fun card that Vance played, which was not a staple in every deck, was Box of Disaster. If a Pokemon V is KO'd from having full HP, you put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon, which then makes them much easier to return KO. And at the time, we had both Iono and Judge, really good supporters for putting your opponent down to a low hand size. Judge puts them down to 4, Iono puts them down to a hand size equal with their remaining prizes, does the same to you, and that would just be good for, well, hurting your opponent, but then you're drawing lows with Genesect and smashing with Mew. Mew was the best deck, and had been for a while, and honestly, it's a good thing that it did get printed as a Worlds deck, because it bloomin' well deserved it. Although was actually printed the previous year, but it didn't win the previous year. So it had to be printed here as a winner's deck. So there we go. Those are all the Pokémon World Championship winning decks in the Masters Division. The other 3 videos are linked in the description. If you haven't checked them out, go check them out now. A nice little history lesson through the Pokémon Trading Card Game World Championships. But now it's over to you guys. Tell me what you think about the 5 decks I've told you about in this video, or any of the 18 winning Worlds decks so far. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. Seriously, these videos took a long time to make, please show them some love. And Twitter is where we talk about Pokemon and a whole bunch of other card games. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. And get shout outs on the channel like the lovely Matt DS, who's been a supporter of ours for a long time now and is a very lovely person. So shout out to them for the support and the loveliness. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wasi Plays.